This meeting is for heirs only, the lawyer announced smugly. I calmly slid a stack of property deeds across the table. You mean these? I already own everything. In a moment, their promised inheritance vanished. The fortune they were waiting for was already mine. The door creaked as I stepped into the conference room and every head turned. Some with surprise, most with annoyance. My uncle raised an eyebrow, my half-sister gave a tight-lipped smile, and the lawyer barely acknowledged me. The air was thick with expectation, but none of it was for me. I took the last seat at the far end of the table, the one no one had saved. That was fine. I didn't come for comfort. The letter had arrived 2 days earlier, folded neatly inside a cream envelope with the firm's seal. It wasn't addressed with warmth, just instructions. A time. A place. A meeting about the estate. I hadn't spoken to any of them since the funeral, when my presence was treated like an inconvenience. My cousins had whispered behind my back. My uncle had made it clear. I was the second wife's daughter and that meant I didn't count. But I did. The lawyer shuffled papers, cleared his throat and began. Thank you all for coming. Today we'll be discussing the final distribution of Mr. Whitmore's estate. He paused, letting the name settle. My father. To them he was a legacy. To me he was a man who tried to do right by everyone and ended up pleasing no one. The lawyer glanced at me, then looked away. This meeting is for heirs only. My cousins chuckled. My uncle leaned back, arms crossed. My half-sister didn't even look up. I didn't blink. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Thick. Neat. I placed it on the table and slid it toward the lawyer. You mean these? I said, my voice calm. I already own everything. The room froze. The lawyer hesitated, then opened the folder. His eyes scanned the documents. Property deeds, trust transfers, business holdings. His fingers trembled slightly as he flipped through them. My uncle leaned forward. What is this? Proof, I said. Legal. Binding. Final. My half-sister's mouth parted, but no words came out. One of my cousins whispered, Is this real? The lawyer cleared his throat again, but this time it wasn't confidence. It was panic. These are legitimate. Signed. Notarized. Transferred months ago. I watched their faces shift. Arrogance melted into confusion. Confusion into disbelief. Disbelief into panic. They had waited years for this moment. They had planned vacations, renovations, investments, based on money they didn't yet have. And now, in seconds, it was gone. My uncle stood. This isn't possible. She wasn't even. Wasn't even what? I asked, meeting his eyes. Worthy. Included. Counted. He didn't answer. My half-sister finally spoke. You planned this. I shook my head. No. I earned it. The silence that followed was thick. No one moved. No one spoke. The lawyer kept flipping through the papers as if hoping one of them would vanish. My cousins stared at me like I'd grown horns. My uncle sat down slowly, his face pale. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just let the silence speak. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm. Not peaceful. Just still. I stood, gathered my bag and turned toward the door. No one followed. Outside the rain had stopped. The sky was gray but the air felt lighter. I walked to my car, heels clicking against the pavement. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. As I drove away I passed the old family estate. The gates were closed, the windows dark. I remembered playing in the garden as a child, chasing butterflies while my cousins locked me out of the playroom. I remembered my father's voice telling me to be patient. That someday they'd see me. They had. And now they couldn't unsee it. Back at home I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. The city lights blinked in the distance. My phone buzzed. Messages from friends, from colleagues, from people who had no idea what had just happened. I didn't reply. I opened my laptop, pulled up the documents again and stared at them. Not for reassurance. Just to feel the weight of what I'd done. I hadn't taken anything. I'd reclaimed it. The next morning I received an email from the lawyer. Short. Formal. All documents verified. No further action required. I closed it without replying. Later that day my half-sister called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. We need to talk. We didn't. I went for a walk instead. The sun was out. The air smelled of jasmine. I passed a bakery, bought a croissant and sat on a bench watching people pass by. No one knew. No one needed to. The past had been rewritten. And I was finally holding the pen. I closed the door behind me, the echo of their stunned silence still ringing in my ears. The rain had stopped, but the storm inside me hadn't. I walked slowly to my car, each step grounding me in the reality I'd built. One they never saw coming. They thought I'd vanished after the funeral. They thought I'd folded into the background like wallpaper. But I hadn't. I'd been working. Watching. Building. I was 12 when my mother passed. She'd been quiet, gentle, the kind of woman who never raised her voice but somehow made you listen. After she was gone, the house changed. My father tried, but grief made him distant. My uncle took over the family gatherings. My cousins filled the halls with laughter that didn't include me. My half-sister, older by 3 years, made it her mission to remind me I was just the second wife's girl. I stopped getting birthday cards. My name disappeared from the family newsletter. I became invisible. But I remembered everything. The dinners where I sat at the far end of the table, ignored. The Christmas mornings where my gifts were smaller, fewer, and sometimes missing altogether. The locked doors to rooms I used to play in. The way my uncle would pat my head like I was a pet, not a person. I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I just watched. At 16 I met Mr. Langston. He was a retired real estate broker who lived 2 blocks from our school. I'd been assigned to help him with yard work as part of a community service project. He noticed how I asked questions about the house, the land, the value. One afternoon he invited me inside and showed me a stack of property maps. "You've got a mind for this," he said. I didn't know what that meant, but I wanted to. Every Saturday I sat at his kitchen table learning about contracts, zoning laws, leverage, and negotiation. He taught me how to read between the lines, how to spot opportunity where others saw risk. My cousins were out partying, shopping, wasting time. I was learning how to build an empire. Mr. Langston became the father figure I never had. He didn't care about my last name. He cared about my questions. When he passed away 2 years later, he left me his portfolio: 3 small buildings, a strip mall, and a piece of land near the river. I cried for the first time in years. Not because I'd inherited something. Because I'd lost someone who saw me. At 19 I bought my first building. It was a run-down duplex on the edge of town. My uncle tried to block the sale. He called the seller, told him I was too young, too inexperienced. I found out, called the seller myself, and convinced him otherwise. I won the bid. I renovated the property, rented it out, and turned a profit within 6 months. That was the first time they realized I wasn't going to disappear. But they still didn't take me seriously. My half-sister laughed when she heard. "A duplex? How quaint." My cousins rolled their eyes. My uncle said, "Let her play. She'll burn out." I didn't respond. I just kept going. Over the next decade I acquired everything they assumed was theirs. I bought the lake house where we used to vacation. I bought the vineyard my uncle bragged about owning. I bought the old family estate, the one with the locked doors and the cold dinners. Quietly. Wiggly. I used shell companies, silent partners, and strategic timing. They never noticed. They were too busy waiting for the will to reward them. I was too busy making sure it wouldn't matter. Each acquisition felt like a stitch in a wound I'd been carrying for years. Not revenge. Restoration. I didn't want their approval. I wanted my own peace. I remember walking through the vineyard after the sale closed. The sun was setting, casting gold across the rows of grapes. I stood there alone and felt something shift. I wasn't the girl they ignored anymore. I was the woman who owned the land they toasted on. 6 months before the meeting, I made the final move. The trust's controlling shares were held by a private firm in New York. It took months of negotiation, legal maneuvering, and quiet persistence. I had help, a former colleague of Mr. Langston's who believed in me. When the papers were signed, I sat in my apartment and stared at them for hours. That stack of deeds wasn't just paper. It was proof. Proof that while they waited, I worked. While they schemed, I built. And now it was mine. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I wanted the moment to be clean, undiluted by gossip or speculation. I wanted them to feel what I had felt: surprise, disbelief, silence. The night before the meeting, I walked through the old estate. The halls were quiet. The portraits stared down at me, unchanged. I touched the banister I used to slide down as a child. I opened the door to the room they used to lock. It was empty now. But I wasn't. I stood in the center of the room and whispered, "I'm still here." No one heard. But I did. That was enough. The next morning I dressed carefully. Not for them. For me. A navy suit, simple jewelry, hair pulled back. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I respected. At the law office I walked in without hesitation. They looked up, surprised. I took my seat calm. And when the lawyer said, "This meeting is for heirs only," I didn't flinch. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder and slid it across the table. "You mean these?" I said. "I already own everything." Their silence was the sound of history being rewritten. And I was the one holding the pen. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The vineyard was still wrapped in a soft hush, dew clinging to the leaves like secrets. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a shawl my mother once wore, watching the horizon stretch itself awake. No buzzing phone. No emails. Just stillness. And for the first time in years I didn't feel like I was waiting for something. I felt like I'd arrived. The gravel crunched under slow footsteps. I turned my head slightly. It was the caretaker, Mr. Alvarez, carrying a basket of fresh bread from the village. He nodded, placed it gently on the table and said, "You look peaceful today." "I am," I replied. He smiled, then walked off toward the barn. I watched him go, the rhythm of his steps steady, familiar. He'd worked here long before I owned the land. He never asked questions. Never treated me like I didn't belong. That, in itself, was rare. Later that morning I walked through the vineyard rows, fingertips grazing the vines. The grapes were still young, not ready for harvest. But they were growing. Quietly. Persistently. Like me. Back inside I passed the study and paused. The drawer where I'd placed the letter to my mother remained closed. I hadn't reread it. I didn't need to. It wasn't written for closure. It was written for truth. The phone rang once that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. It was my cousin, the one who used to steal my notebooks and laugh when I cried. His voice was clipped, rehearsed. "We need to talk. There's been confusion. Maybe we can work something out." I deleted it. That evening I received a handwritten note. Delivered by courier. No return address. Just my name in familiar cursive. I opened it slowly, already knowing who it was from. My half-sister. The note was short. "I don't understand you. I don't know if I ever did. But I hope you're happy. I hope it was worth it." I folded the paper and placed it in the same drawer as my mother's letter. Some words don't deserve responses. Some wounds don't need reopening. The next day I visited the old estate again. Not out of nostalgia. Out of necessity. The renovation team had finished restoring the library and I wanted to see it myself. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that used to make me feel small. Now it felt spacious. The library smelled of fresh wood and old pages. The shelves were full again. Books I'd selected, stories I'd loved. I ran my hand along the spines, stopping at one my mother used to read aloud. I pulled it out, sat in the armchair by the window and opened to the first page. I didn't read. I just sat. The door creaked open behind me. I turned. It was the lawyer. "I wasn't expecting you," I said. "I wanted to see the place," he replied. "It's changed. So have I." He nodded, walked in slowly and looked around. "You did well." "I did what I had to." He paused. "They're still trying to contest it. I'm not surprised. They won't win." "I know." He sat across from me, folded his hands. "You know, your father once told me he worried about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Worried?" "He said you were too quiet. Too observant. That you saw things others missed." I didn't respond. "He thought that might make you lonely." I looked out the window. It did. But it also made you strong. I met his eyes. That part he never said. He didn't have to. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he stood. "I'll leave you to it." As he walked out, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Just space. That night I walked through the vineyard again. The stars were out, scattered like breadcrumbs across the sky. I stopped near the edge of the property where the old stone wall still stood. I used to sit there as a child, knees scraped, heart heavy, listening to laughter I wasn't part of. I climbed up, sat on the wall and looked out. The wind rustled the vines. I whispered, "I'm still here." No one answered. But I didn't need them to. The legacy they chased was built on assumption. On entitlement. On waiting. The legacy I built was earned. It was quiet. It was mine. And it was enough.